Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. We are delighted to have you here, wherever you're dialing in from. Welcome to our Microsoft Security and Education webinar. We have a fantastic and full agenda to get through today, but before we kick things off, please just let me introduce myself, who New Scaler are, and some of the members of our team that will be joining us today. So my name is Laura Desmond and I'm the Business Development Executive here at New Scaler. We are a Microsoft partner based in Maidenhead, and we are a managed hosting and cloud technology company. We specialise in delivering security solutions in the education sector. So joining us today is our cybersecurity expert and CEO, Amit Gokru. Also, we are very lucky to have Faisal Hussain joining us today. We call him Sid, but he is the Senior Cybersecurity Program Manager at Microsoft, and he's got an absolute wealth of knowledge in this area. So yeah, we're very, very lucky to have him today. Together, they're going to be discussing the very real challenges with security in education, the threat landscape within Microsoft technology, and they will be giving an overview of the Zero Trust framework. And finally, they will be talking about how you can actually save money with Microsoft products. Also, I just wanted to draw your attention to our chat that we're using for Q&A. So that is open with our moderators working in the background. So please, we do encourage any questions at all, just pop them into the chat and we'll go through as we go through the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through them all. But if we unfortunately miss any, we will email you a response instead. And like I said, this webinar is being recorded, so don't worry if you miss anything, because we will be sending this to you after the session. So without further ado, I will pass you on to Amit.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everyone. And such an exciting day to talk about security in education. Bright sunshine outside, at least in Southeast England. So, security in education, we got an agenda to actually get through, which Laura spoke about. That would be, what are the current challenges in education sector? What is the situation in education sector? What is the education sector threat landscape? And then we'll talk about the Zero Trust, which is widely spoken about in every industry vertical. And then we'll also touch upon the cost saving opportunities which education sector can have in terms of using the Microsoft technology and how to best use of the investments which you've already done in Microsoft. And then we'll have a wrap and the questions from every one of you. So let's talk about the security in education sector. I mean, we are in the era of unprecedented economic uncertainty, and literally organization of all type sees the need to accelerate digital transformation. So, I mean, New Scaler, Microsoft, we work together and we see a lot of digital transformation happening in every industry vertical, which is really good. But as soon as you work on digital transformation, you need to ensure the workers, I mean, all the employees or students' productivity and respond rapidly to the shifting customer landscape. Now, when we talk about digital transformation, I think the biggest challenge is how do I actually protect my data? How do I protect my information whilst I'm moving from point A to point B? How do I actually keep all the bad actors away? How do I secure my environment? And these are some of the challenges which we have seen in the education sector as well. So education sector, the security is now a reality. Education sector is on red alert. And I'll tell you, and I'll show you in a minute on a Microsoft Live website where Microsoft is actually tracking all the global alerts on a minute-by-minute basis. And then you will see that education sector is really severely hit. Now, some of the organization, they have actually started working to develop a new digital capability, and they break down the data silos across multiple clouds. But all the cyber criminals are also living in the cloud because that makes them legitimate as well. And they launch all their attacks from the cloud technology. So in the education sector, what we have seen is we have seen a paradigm shifting from, I mean, this is after COVID. What we have seen is it's a huge shift where education sector is on red alert. Why do we say that? It's because of this. I mean, education sector has the highest rate of ransomware of all industries. I mean, it's over 3 times the rate of ransomware found in healthcare, more than 10 times the rate found in finance. Finances has not actually made the list. And what I would like to show you is the landscape on the Microsoft Global Threat Activity Monitor. So this is a website where you can actually go and have a look at what the landscape is, what are the top threats, and all you have to do is just select United Kingdom, scroll down, and then you'll be able to see the most affected industries. If you click on that, and then it'll come up with the details on the education sector and how badly the education sector is affected because of this. You can see that there are top threats. I mean, some of them are adware, and we can understand why, because a lot of students are now using their own device. A lot of universities, education sector have actually allowed bring your own device policy. So as soon as you do that, people bring in their own device. They try to consume the information from the universities or higher education. They accidentally click on any of the adware, and that's how the virus is actually transported from their device into the university or institution network. So we spoke about it, and we thought that what are the best ways to actually tackle this going forward? And then we realized that there are some challenges which are not only online, but there are some physical challenges as well. So I mean, we all know that. I mean, you can see on your slide that education sector is really hard hit by your online exploits. But I mean, after like COVID, universities are also hardly hit on a physical perspective as well. I mean, 42% of the higher education leaders says that their institution locks and doors are not properly configured for safety and security. So people are actually using the passes, or people are actually using the identity card from another pupil getting into the university, and they are planting attacks as well. And university and higher education have got a lot of data which they want to secure, a lot of assets which are actually a premium to them, and they would like to actually secure them. They would like to secure the information, but then lack of investment have actually opened up the challenges for education sector. Now, when we talk about the challenges, before we explore the ways to simplify security, I mean, let us look at the security realities. Today does not feel very simple, does it? Because we can see that a digital transformation has actually allowed us to access the information from even a cyber cafe, from even the comfort of our home. So we've got a building complexity across several vectors. First, as we all make progress on our digital transformation effort, our digital estate continues to expand, and our users have a multiple endpoints, application to consume the data from, and access to ever-growing data sources. So you have your library apps, you have your student information system, where you keep all your student data. So it becomes your student database, and that's your master record of all the students. And then you have other applications like ebook portals and other libraries where a student can actually go and do their research and consume the information. This is not going to slow down. I mean, the technological innovation are actually on the rise. So users are expecting, or students are expecting, to actually consume the information at the I mean, probably using the laptop they're using, or maybe mobile phones as well. Now, the more connected devices you have, the more open your surface attack area is. So we can see that there are growing landscape where, I mean, digital estates are actually expanding. The solutions are becoming complex as well. We have seen with some of our customers, we noticed that they actually bought some Microsoft 365 licenses. They started actually implementing Microsoft 365, especially post-pandemic or during the pandemic, where they wanted to actually conduct the remote learning. They gave the capability, or they gave the ability for pupils to actually consume the learning online using Microsoft Teams. And I mean, that has actually introduced a new paradigm, because universities have to come up, or education sector has to come up with ideas to actually allow students to actually learn online, at the same time protect the information, which has become a challenge. And on top of that, traditional education sector relies heavily on the IT department, which is mostly outsourced. So in order to manage the new technology, which has just been introduced, it does take time to actually create the process, create the ability for the administrator to consume it, and to make sure that we have all the security gates around protecting the information. Now, these are real challenges, and we do talk about it, that how do we actually overcome it. We'll be going through some of the solutions which customers are actually making use of, and that's working really well. So I think the idea for today is, how do we actually unlock some of the solutions which can actually help us to navigate through this threat landscape. And that brings me to the next slide, where I'll definitely invite my Microsoft fellow speaker to come and speak to us about the education threat landscape. Over to you, Fazil.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Amit. Thanks for having me here. It's quite an interesting topic to discuss about the threat landscape, because it's so huge, it's so vast. It's very difficult to comprehend the concept of threat landscape these days. But let me just focus on the education. And if I take a step back, and rather than starting from today, if we just take a step back a little bit into the past, let's say from 6 to 10 years ago from today, mostly the threat landscape was built with a mindset to put the barriers for the threat actors. As of today, because the infrastructure and the way we consume information, it has all gone hybrid. The threat landscape is evolving rapidly. And the pace of this change and the rate of attacks, they are also changing. And it is an absolutely asymmetric warfare now. So the threat landscape is not about the barriers anymore. In reality, the threat actors, they don't see the barriers, they see the opportunities only. And this is how they progress in today's world. And this is becoming a big challenge, as you have shown on the slide a bit. The challenge for the education sector. And if we look at the data, and I'm going to share some stories from my experience in Microsoft, like what we look at and what is this telemetry or the threat intelligence that we are sharing with you that you just presented. Why education sector we are seeing all this? Because if I try to put a bucket list of the cyber threats in EDU, they are mostly around phishing, spam injections, form jacking. These are techniques, these are methods. But to be honest, I mean, if I just put it simply, it's the social engineering. Social engineering is probably the biggest technique, or a major technique, not just for education, but across the industry. And because as the time progresses, the things are changing dramatically. Now, I'm not going to explain or educate you guys here about how the social engineering is happening. You should probably go and read Kevin Mitnick, the best ever con actor produced in the history. But just for some of you who have not actually looked into this concept, it's like a Hollywood movie. A lady dressed in red walks through the bank security straight into the vaults and pulls the job out. That's social engineering. I think that should give you an idea. So threat actors are actually looking for the opportunities by leveraging this technique. And this technique is resulting in some advanced persistent threat, and the threat landscape is on its own, is also evolving gradually with it.
So Faisal,
Yeah.
I mean, when people talk about social engineering in education sector, I mean, because when you talk about the finance industry, I mean, you have the crown jewels, i.e., you have the money to steal, you have the huge amount of information. What are actually these threat actors trying to actually steal from the education sector? What is
Yes.
the impact of cyber attacks?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. What are they after? Obviously, they're after your assets. Now, it really depends in the education sector. How do you classify your assets? So for primary schooling system in UK or across the world, the assets are different. The
Mhm.
way I see it, because I had the opportunity to work on the primary school governors board, and I have learned a lot in a primary school setting that what exactly the head teacher is looking for. For primary school, it's primarily about child's identity. They are very concerned about children's, their identity and their safety. Now, why they are so bothered about this? Because this could, if let's say, I'm just giving you a scenario, and those scenarios have actually been a real story, and we know how much effort the British government has put into this, developing the secure schooling systems and how the police is engaged with all this. It's about protecting children from extortionists, from paedophiles, from cyberbullying. All kind of problems are there for parents and for schools. And now with the regulations in the industry, obviously this could become a headache for a primary education setting if they don't take it seriously. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on this as we move across this particular slide. But this is just a typical trend that we see for primary school levels. But when you step into the higher education, at a university levels, the threat landscape is pretty much the same. It's around identity for the students there and for the staff, but it's actually much more than that. So there are active threat actors that are involved in IP theft. We have seen in the past the nation state activity where these threat actors were sponsored by them against a particular nation, and they were just stealing the IP, the intellectual property. That's probably the biggest thing in the universities. The future technologies that will be coming out, they are somewhere in the university where the IP is being worked on, and that IP has been taken away now by these actors. The other one is, of course, the major, as you alluded on, the online education system. These threat actors could be extortionists. They want to just disrupt your system. They're not looking for any money from a university, but they want to disrupt your business. They want to bring down your online education system. Now imagine the loss you have it should you have to go into that scenario. We all dealt with the COVID pandemic. Now, these sort of activities are on the rise. They target these online learning platforms. And there are multiple reasons why they're doing it. But I think personally what our learning is just to disrupt the business.
You
HR
touched on a
systems.
really good point, Faisal,
Yeah.
because government is now thinking about putting a cybersecurity fines on any services which are essential to the population, and education is one of them. You're right in saying that sometimes the attacks are actually, the aim of the attack is not to actually steal any information, but to disrupt the service, to actually make sure that you have the brand damage.
That's
and
correct. Yeah.
and that can play a role as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. I mean, I think if you ask me, I mean, targeting HR systems would be very interesting from the threat landscape perspective. I mean, if I have to compromise, I mean, why would I just waste my time here and there? I could disrupt the business.
Yeah.
I could compromise the identities there. And I'm going to give you some examples just to explain this a little bit more while we are still on this slide for the threat landscape.
Yep.
So there are some threat actors that we keep tracking. As of today, just to give you a context of the threat landscape, what we are dealing with as Microsoft. So this is not education across the industry. Microsoft sees, and we have done this research and just presented it, and it's on the internet now, that the cyber cost to the global economy by 2025 is going to be 10 trillion. Trillion with T. So $10 trillion, that's going to be a cost. Now, suddenly, if you look at this number, this is actually mind-boggling. What is going on? What is happening suddenly? Because we are all going hybrid and online, as our assets are more connected, and as you mentioned, through multiple devices, our phones, tablets, PCs, whatever you say, our gaming consoles, all that stuff, where children are connected to online education plus entertainment. For Microsoft, this is important. So every day we receive 43 trillion signals, again with T.
Oh, brilliant.
And what are these signals? Well, 43 trillion signals when we receive it, surely we are doing something. So I'll explain that a little bit in a zero trust. What do I mean by this? And we have got around 8,500 cybersecurity professionals just sitting in our SOCs, monitoring these signals, and we are building lots of technology around this to understand what's going on. And then we dissect all this information and present you in the format. So
just to sum it up for everyone on the call as well, that Microsoft has actually got the tool which are actually used to monitor the endpoint, to monitor the information which you have available on the devices. And based on the monitoring, the alerts are generated based on the monitoring data as part of the process. And those alerts are then evaluated by Microsoft during their threat landscape, which Faisal is talking about. Does that make sense? And security-wise, I think identity is one of the parameters which you highlighted is a really key point. Does that make sense, Faisal?
Yes and no. So yes, we do rely on alerts, but threat signaling is a part of the threat intelligence, which means we are learning the behaviors as well. So there are 250 unique threat actors that we are actively chasing with our partners. There are 35 ransomware groups that we are really after them. So when we say threat signaling, Microsoft is not just monitoring them, we are proactively chasing them as well with our partners like law enforcement and various governments across the planet. And you have seen our activities with the Ukraine war, how Microsoft provided the intelligence before the war actually started. So we are using that signaling, and this is bubbling up into our commercial products as well, if that's making sense. So coming back to our point, I just want to give very high level, I want to touch about certain APTs, advanced persistent threat actors. So the threat landscape could be as simple as a virus or a malware that your antivirus detects, but it could become complex when you see an APT. The advanced persistent threat actors are behind these because they are persistent. They have targeted you, they are sitting there. And the most complicated is obviously the ransomware model. Now, ransomware are the most sophisticated and advanced attacking techniques. And it has actually become a business. It's a business model. We call it as a ransomware as a service. I would encourage you to go and search on Microsoft sites and read through it, ransomware as a service, and you'll see there's a business model. We have operators, we have customer services, we have attackers, we have developers. So they all work together. They have created this industry on the dark web, and they actually target, and then they take money, they disrupt you, they extortion, whatever the idea is, they want to bring you down. So if I quickly shift gears here, because I want to connect the threat landscape, the current threat landscape with the zero trust. Let's say there are some very known groups, and we have published quite a few white papers if you go to the Microsoft website. So for instance, Lapsus. Lapsus has been, it's a group, and last week, I think this week, there was a news on BBC that there were some arrests made in UK, in Oxfordshire. A 16-year-old guy has been arrested by police for Lapsus activity. And he was actually running this ring. Now, why Lapsus? Now, Lapsus is a very interesting threat actor. So what they do, they go after big companies like Microsoft, like Okta. So Microsoft goes after these threat actors this group is going after Microsoft or Okta and these companies. And what they were doing is they were leveraging various sort of social engineering techniques like SIM jacking, compromising your phone by sending a text message. You click it, they own your phone. They compromise your identity to get into your systems. Once they get into your systems, they keep chasing and be persistent and pivot themselves silently in your network just to see what you're doing, and then try to compromise your assets.
Okay.
So obviously Microsoft load them into our honeypot networks, and we try to figure out, and we found the guys and the law enforcement there. But imagine a group like Lapsus. Today they are after universities. Now tomorrow, against Microsoft and bigger companies. They could also focus on universities. They could focus on the other sectors as well.
Correct.
And they are doing it.
They are very well doing it, Fazal. And I think there's one more point we would like to add over here as well. That when the threat actors are actually developing the threat vectors, they are developing it through artificial intelligence or machine learning. And then when the threats are actually fired across the globe, it's fired indiscriminately against all the industry verticals. So, I mean, it's still like firing a machine gun, using a machine gun and firing it indiscriminately against all the people. And that's what Faisal is actually alluding to, that right now they're targeting a specific organization, but then the threats are there. It's a ready-made package, and then when it's launched, it can be launched on any industry vertical. And education seems to be the one which is actually picking up heavy load of damage because of that.
That's correct. So it's a low-hanging fruit for them at this point because of the lack of focus and investment. So attackers like Nobilium. So these guys are targeting very specifically the managed service providers. And when they target the service providers, they are walking down the lateral chain to target their customers. So if you look at the threat landscape, it's from Lapsus to Nobilium. The dynamics are very different. And I would encourage you to go and have a read on Nobilium on Microsoft Security site to understand what these guys are doing, why the service providers, like targeting them specifically to them, dropping their tools, utilizing their tools. Now, this brings me to another interesting threat actor activity, which Microsoft worked in last year, and we chased these guys. It was SolarWind attacks.
Okay.
The SolarWind attacks are basically, for instance, you are using a tool to manage your network or you manage your systems. They compromise that legitimate tooling by injecting their code, and they own it. You are running a tool that is made by a third-party company and you're paying licensing to them, but actually it's controlled by these threat actors. Yeah. And at the end of the day, let's say if you're a software company, you built your software that's already owned by them right from the build. So this is another dimension of the threat landscape these days. So have a look at SolarWinds, why it has become a headache for the global industry. And lastly, I want to touch on this particular slide is the story that came out, Log4j, open source tooling that you have, especially in the university settings, because you have a lot of free tooling and the open source tooling that is used. And look at the story for Log4j, which is a very used system for the web server environment for monitoring, the logging. How they have utilized it and how many years it's going to take for an industry to patch it up. It has become a big headache. So this threat landscape is actually asymmetric at this point, because as you said, it is moving from human-based attacks to machine learning-based attacks. So we as defenders, we are leveraging this 43 trillion signals into machine learning, and our defenses are based on that. And the attackers are also leveraging that. So at this point, I would say it is good that if we just look into this particular slide where Charlie's been talking about something, and this introduces us to a particular mindset that why we felt as Microsoft to start advocating the zero trust security models, why zero trust framework, why we need it. If I want to put it in simple words, zero trust is a mindset. It's not a particular technology or a way you implement a technology. It's your mindset. If you look at these guys on the slide here, it kind of tells me a story of an immigration department, like especially the US immigration, like, oh, I don't know you, I don't trust you. So zero trust mindset is basically you don't trust an insider. Of course, you don't trust an outsider, but you don't trust an insider. I work for you or I am your supplier. I really don't trust you. I want to stop you and you have to follow the protocol. That is a mindset of zero trust. And to understand it further, if you move on to the next slide, please, we need to see what Microsoft is doing. It's a very complicated slide here. Really, I can speak for literally a day on it, but we are not going to touch on those technical discussions and topics, but at a very, very, very high level. If you look at on the left-hand side of the slide, we are talking about identities. Now, why identity suddenly has become so important? Because, you know, back in the days, DMZ or perimeter network, where you had the barriers, was the thing to protect your assets. Now, in a cloud-connected world of technology, that barrier is gone. It's dead. It is there. That's fine for traditional threat actors. But the modern threat actor is after your identity as a human and your machine's identity as a non-human. So your mobile phone has an identity and I have an identity. I'm a user of that mobile phone. There are two identities. And as a threat actor, I'm after them. Why? Because I want to reach to your vault where your systems are holding your assets, your data. It's all about the data gravity, which is on your right side of your screen, that you are trying to protect, because that is what you are today. The global economy is all about data. I don't need to repeat all those things. Data is the new gold. So where the gold is, there the theft is. So if it is data, I want that. I need it. And this is where I'm going to pull all the triggers. It could be a very targeted attack in the case of guys like Lapsus. They can chase me. They can compromise me, only me, in my environment and my phone or my other identity devices. And as I walk in through the physical security of my secure environment and through my home network or wherever I go over my remote network, they are following me. They are actually with me. That's the idea. And when you go and touch apps, infrastructure, network, devices, well, these are the core pillars there for a zero trust. You need to secure all these. Devices are your endpoints. You need to secure them. You should know what your device should know, that my identity is being used for what. And if my device can talk to my network, and my network can speak to my apps, and my apps talk to my infrastructure, and all this information comes to some kind of dashboards where I could look at it and take some decisions. This is what I want. I want transparent activity going on across my identity and my infrastructure. It doesn't matter if it's in the cloud, it's on-premise, because the biggest challenge in universities, Amit, I can tell you, is a shadow IT.
Absolutely.
And universities are struggling to narrow down and control the shadow IT, because you have a SharePoint farm somewhere and you have a share where the student is supposed to upload a document. But what they do is they just post it on a third-party app that they like on their device, and they share that document somewhere there on the internet. Now that's a problem for your IT, because now the shadow IT is controlling that document as well. That's not supposed to be there. Like your HR person could have an Excel sheet with some payroll information, could be on. So that is becoming a challenge. And this is where, as an attacker, I'm after that. Absolutely. You need to have the solution in place that brings all this signaling together and it should bubble up in front of you for your environment. And you should have an ability to tailor it down. And this is where the Microsoft Zero Trust framework comes handy, because what we do is all those 43 trillion signals, we do the work in the background for our M365 licensed products like O365 and all that, our endpoints, Windows 11 and all this. But then based on the industry threats and active attackers and activities across the industry, across the verticals, we push that information to your tenant and we inform you through the tenant. This is what we see. Now it's on your particular side as a tenant that you come up with your own threat modeling and with your own solutions, like the solutions that you provide, Amit, to your customers, that, okay, on top of Microsoft, you need to keep an eye here at the end of the day, so the business decision makers can actually see what is it for me in it,
Absolutely.
where I need to invest. So if I wrap up my zero trust slide.
I think there's one more point I would like to bring up, Faisal, where you could actually give your input, and that would be really useful to everyone. I think the landscape has moved where people started working from home and people started actually consuming the information, like students started learning from home as well. So identity and devices never used to actually couple together in the past, because in the past, people used to have a traditional data center network where all the information is actually put into a data center, which is then protected by a firewall or a network security parameter. Now, with the help of identity, identities can be anything. It can represent a person, it can represent a service, or it can represent an IoT device, like your cameras in your campus, which is then feeding the information back to your institute security system. Now, when an identity attempts to access a resource, we need to verify. I mean, the principle of zero trust is that you need to verify the identity with strong authentication. And that's where I've seen a lot of my customers are struggling, because they tend to think that their firewalls can still secure their data. However, the information is actually consumed by putting identity in place with a weak password, not enabling MFA, which could actually save them a lot of trouble. Now, identities is then coupled. So once the information is then verified, it then flows through your devices. And those devices then actually create some major roles. So that's the reason on the left-hand side of the screen, you see identity and devices coupled together, which forms a partnership. Then it consumes the information, which is in the form of your data, apps, infrastructure, and network. So, Faisal, I mean, have you seen a lot of like use cases in education sector where they've actually that's a low-hanging fruit, that if as soon as they actually secured their identity and their devices, they've actually secured a lot of their infrastructure. Is that Microsoft is seeing as well?
That is correct. Identity, of course, is the biggest challenge, but you know, as I said in the beginning, that social engineering is probably the biggest headache for education sector. A student receives an email, or a staff within the education setting receives an email, they click on it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So the thing is, at the end of a day, the attack, think from an attacker's perspective, they need to lure you into clicking something, and they are done with it. So you need to think about addressing that challenge. So if you are using, let's say, Office 365, the moment you click it, we detonate the URL in a chamber, just like a bomb explosion in a chamber, before presenting it to you, because we want to see, what is this? Is it a malware or is it a legitimate link? So that's what you see happening in the background in O365. So it's the technology. But trust me, my learning for the education sector, it goes back as of today, and I'm not kidding, to the basics, to the basic cyber hygiene. If I give you 6 or 7 points and I leave you all to think about it, are you doing these right? For instance, enable multi-factor authentication. Have you done that? Apply least privilege access and secure most of your sensitive and privileged credentials. Well, okay. Review all authentication activity for remote access infrastructure. Secure and manage systems with an up-to-date patching. How important is that? I can't emphasize more. How important is getting your systems patched the moment Microsoft or your third-party product vendors release security updates? How important is that? Use anti-malware and workload protection tooling. Isolate legacy systems. You still have legacy systems in your network. You should ask your IT why they are there. Why can't you move? And enable logging of key functions. These are 6 and 7 basic cyber hygiene principles I have seen across 99% of the environments. And this is why you see that 85% compromise bar, because you still have some backdoors open. Some modem is still hanging somewhere at the back of your network that somebody's having an access bypassing your firewall. So that I would say, Amit, is a lot of information. I think I tried to squeeze it in, but I'll leave it here, and I'm happy to take any questions. And it's back to you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Faisal. I think Faisal has actually explained really well what the threat landscape is, how Zero Trust can actually help the organization, all the institutes in the education sector. So thank you very much. That's a useful insight. Now, moving on from that, I think the biggest challenge with the education industry is to find the money to have the security in place. And there are proven parameters from Microsoft which can actually help you to use your existing investment to your advantage and then implement the security. So let's go through them as well. I think the cost saving category should start from literally consolidating. Have I got too many vendors, and can I consolidate them? And if I'm trying to consolidate them, then how do I actually go about it? Now, these challenges can be resolved, or we can actually find a way to resolve them by having Microsoft 365 licenses. So I'll come to that in a minute. But basically, these are the biggest cost saving categories which we have identified with Microsoft, and this has really helped a lot of customers across education vertical. I mean, especially around IT administration and deployment. I mean, still, we worked with a university in the past where they were actually deploying their student devices manually. They had an IT vendor who was actually provisioning all the devices, and then those devices were actually sent to students as loan devices, or they were actually used in university by the faculty as well. And they were spending a huge amount of money just to provision the devices as soon as they buy them from the hardware vendor. And then we went in there, and then we actually introduced Microsoft Intune, which is also part of their existing package, which they were paying for, i.e. the existing Microsoft license they were paying for. And then we implemented Autopilot, which helped them to actually deploy the devices automatically. And as Faisal actually mentioned, that security patching is really important on devices. So we managed to actually get that across using Intune as well by deploying the patches automatically and monitoring the devices for the threat. So not only you're just provisioning the device, you are making sure that your security is uniform across the organization. And that reduces the total cost of risk. I mean, you know that your devices are not only deployed with all the application which user needs, but it's also deployed with all the security tooling which you need to protect your information. And then the physical and TE landscape, where you want to reduce the office cost by moving, the on-site employees, by allowing them to actually work from home as well. If you can protect the information, then why not? And there's a lot of automation which actually takes place in cloud. And once you automate all the process, it takes time to actually start with, but you reap the benefits as you go along. So these are the real cost benefits. With the cloud model, I think it's not new anymore. So people are, used to from understanding the capital investment to operational investment, which is CapEx to OpEx cash flow, where people used to actually invest in the hardware and then they used to consume it for 3 or 4 years. Now you don't actually have to buy the hardware. You just have to consume it. And pay as you go. So if you're not consuming it, if you don't need it, you can get rid of it. And that's really easy by using Microsoft licenses. So if I then move to the next slide, how can you actually simplify the security landscape and save? And Faisal touched upon identity, Faisal touched upon information protection, Faisal touched upon the device management as well. Now we use a lot of vendors, like Faisal was talking about SolarWinds as well, which has been recently attacked, and from my experience, that's been used in a lot of universities to monitor the security landscape. Now, what if I can tell you that Microsoft has got all of it covered within their Office 365 licenses, and that really helps you if you consolidate all the vendors, and if Microsoft 365 does it for you, like you see on the right-hand side of the slide. Identity and access management, yeah, it definitely does it. Threat protection, Microsoft actually provides that. Information protection, it provides that. So then how much it equates in saving? You can literally save about 52% of your cost. And let me show you how do you do that. So with identity, I think there are, with the help of your A1, A3, and A5 licenses, the cost can literally go down for about 8.7 pounds per user. And the best way to achieve is you put all the security pillars in place, you follow the Microsoft security framework, and then you save money by using your existing license. So we were engaged with the university, and they were using a lot of devices, and they bought the Microsoft A5 licenses, and they never used it. So all we did is we actually enabled the functionality and provided them with 52% of the saving. And that provided them with the security roadmap as well, which actually kept them out of the harm's way from cyber attacks. Now, I mean, I've just put together a potential saving and cash flow for a different organization, be it a small organization, medium organization, or a university which has got like 20,000 plus seats. You can literally have a lot of savings across the year. All you have to do is just find out what your security posture is going to be, what your security focus is going to be, and then the Microsoft 365 license can actually provide you with that sort of landscape. Now, in terms of the mapping the security to the desired state, look at how we're doing it. I mean, probably entry-level licenses, which Microsoft has actually come up, is A1, which is absolutely free, and even that has got the basic security engraved into it. So you can literally have the minimum level of security, and then you can still manage it on your Microsoft 365 landscape. Then you go a bit higher, and that's your emerging landscape, where you have A3 licenses, which a lot of universities and a lot of higher education, a lot of primary education sector are actually using. And that provides a bare minimum capability of not only protecting you from all the security threats, but also providing a data protection, i.e. the information protection lifecycle. You can also do the data classification, and you can do a lot of identity protection and monitoring as part of it. If you move forward and if you're looking for advanced security, which a lot of education sectors still have bought it, because education sector licenses are very much discounted compared to the enterprise level of licenses. So a lot of education sector institute have opted in to actually go for A5 licenses, which provides you with a wider, in fact, more better version of security in place, where you can not only protect your data, but you have the complete control of how the information flows across the various channels. And then if you are an institute, if you are a university who's actually trying to protect the data, like your research, like some of the new innovations which your students are working on or your researchers are working on, then you can actually protect the data using the Azure landscape, where we can actually put a digital transformation, security digital transformation project in place, and then we can start actually saving your data using Azure Sentinel and all the other beautiful Microsoft products, where Microsoft has actually invested about 3.7 billion pounds recently, just to make sure that they capture all the threats, and then they make sure that all the threats are then remediated using their remediation process as well. So it's an exciting time, and all I want to see is that we all want to actually go down to the desired capabilities, as in like, how do I actually create my student secure? How do I actually keep my data secure? How do I provide the personalized student and faculty service using AI? All these solutions are now available in the cloud. But the biggest question which we need to ask is, what is my current state? And what is my plan to actually make it better? And that's it from my side. So if you have any questions, pop it into the chat. But other than that, I'll pass you on to Laura.
Thank you very much, Sid and Amit, for a really brilliant presentation. I'm sure all of our attendees received a lot of valuable information there. So yeah, just following on from this webinar, we just recommend that you do adopt and implement the Zero Trust model as the baseline in your organisation. We do advise that you take a moment just to identify your desired capabilities from short term to long term, and to map your security strategy. You should think about all of your users, first party and third party included. But thank you so much for all of the questions that were put in. And as I said, this session has been recorded and it will be sent to you. So if you would like to share it with a colleague or refer back to it, you can do so. However, as you can see on this slide, my email address is available. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or message me or my colleagues on LinkedIn, as we would be more than happy to help you. And also, we are holding a series of Azure and Microsoft 365 workshops. You can visit our new Scaler website for more information on these. And again, if that's of interest to you, then please do email me. And finally, Microsoft actually have a security briefing for their global customers on the second Wednesday of every month for all their Microsoft customers, and the recordings are available. So if that's something that you're interested in, then please follow the link, which is also on this slide, and you can also find the link for their previous meetings as well. But yeah, for now, that is the end of our session. So from everyone at NewScaler, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, thank you so much, Sid, for your time. It's really been appreciated. And yeah, have a lovely day, everyone. Goodbye.